AOC.com.
Listen to podcasts of Joe Walsh and Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Dan and Amy, how about this? Bill Gates, a man of the left, but not a man completely out of his mind.
Well, that's good.
Not a man who completely lives in a woozy dream world like the one inhabited by AOC and others of her ilk, those combating colonial cauliflower.
Yes. I still laugh every time you say it. It's true. She's probably, working in her garden right now this morning, tilling the soil.
Right after she's done rewriting the season finale or the series finale of Game of Thrones, which neither she nor Chief Warren enjoyed. Bill Gates on renewable energy. Uh-oh.
Right. Oh, now you doggone it.
He's cruising for a harshly worded video message from AOC. Listen to this.
So a lot of people are very optimistic, as you know, with wind and solar, the renewables cost coming down, the battery costs are coming down. You think that's enough, or do you think they need more?
That is so disappointing. I mean, really. Václav yesterday, he said, okay, here's Tokyo, 27 million people. You have 3 days of a cyclone, basically every year. It's 22 gigawatts rate over 3 days. Tell me what battery solution is going to sit there and provide that power. I mean, let's not joke around. You're multiple orders of magnitude, $100 per kilowatt hour. That's nothing. That doesn't solve the reliability problem. And remember, electricity is 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. Whenever we came up with this term clean energy, I think it screwed up people's minds because now they don't understand. I was at this conference in New York, I won't name it, and they were saying, all these financial guys got on stage and said, we're going to rate companies in terms of their CO2 output. And we're going to say this company puts out a lot of CO2 and financial markets are magical and all of a sudden the CO2 will stop being emitted. And I was like, okay, how are you going to make steel? Do you guys on Wall Street, do you have something in your desks that makes steel? What? Where's the fertilizer, cement, plastic? Where's it going to come from? Do planes fly through the sky because of some number you put on a spreadsheet? So the madness of this so-called finance is the solution. I just don't get that. There is no substitute for how the industrial economy runs today.
Uh-oh.
Somebody woke.
You're going to have a lot of temper tantrums being thrown in the House Democrat Socialist Caucus right after they got done with Pelosi this morning when they hear what Bill Gates had to say. For more on what Bill Gates had to say, we're pleased to be joined by Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, chief economist for CNN. Steve, Bill Gates making sense. We don't get to say that all the time.
Wow, I'm so glad you played that audio tape. You know what? It sounds like Bill Gates just got finished reading my book with Kathleen Townsend called Feeling Freedom, because that's exactly the message. We have a line in our book, and it's almost like Bill Gates almost stole it. It's that you can build a windmill with steel, but you can't build steel with windmills.
Right.
It is so true. And by the way, Bill Gates he's a smart guy when it comes to energy. If you wanted clean energy, let's just assume for a minute, Dan and Amy, that you couldn't use fossil fuels. Let's assume that they're satanic and no more fossil fuels because they're destroying the planet. I don't accept that, but let's say that were true. And let's say then we have a country with 330 million people and we have a $20 trillion industrial economy. If you couldn't use fossil fuels for electric power production, what would you do? And only a nutcase would say, let's use wind and solar power. The solution obviously would be, if you needed a clean energy source, would be to build 100 nuclear power plants, right? And then you're done. One fraction of the cost of what wind and solar cost. And by the way, the footprint from a nuclear power plant compared to, you'd have to industrialize the entire American landscape if you wanted to produce enough electricity, for Chicago and Manhattan and, Los Angeles. my point is that wind and solar aren't even green energy sources. They require miles and miles of land, for all the wind and solar panels to be installed. So good for Bill Gates. He gets it.
Well, the other thing that Gates said that was important too. It's an argument we don't make enough too. Just the practical argument of reliability, using the Japanese example.
I didn't get the point about the liability. What was that?
Well, reliability, when you have a
I thought you said liability.
No,
yeah,
reliability.
Exactly.
Reliability.
I think I told you guys this. I mean, you know it because you're there in Chicago. But when you had the polar vortex, which was back in February, was that where the
I'm still
never
thawing
got
out.
above zero? The wind and solar panels froze, and they were unusable. So you had to fire up your coal plants. Imagine for a minute. During, what did the temperature get down to, like 30 below zero at one point? Imagine if all the electricity had gone out. I mean, you would have literally had not, 100 people die. You would have had thousands and thousands of people die from the elements. That's why there's a good reason, ladies and gentlemen, that we use natural gas and coal, because they're very cheap and reliable sources of electric power production.
Okay, well, I have to tell you, I watched The View yesterday, so you didn't have to. I just caught myself. And Whoopi Goldberg, I'm not kidding you, was up there talking about coal, saying, well, coal's a thing of the past. No one uses coal anymore.
Oh, really?
I'm seriously. And nobody came up to her, nobody said, really, Whoopi, people are still using coal.
You're asking me about coal?
Yes.
Well, look, coal is what, if you read my book, Fueling Freedom, The Mad War on Energy, you will know that it was basically fossil fuels, especially coal production and gas production, that actually caused the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, which changed everything in terms of living standards on this planet, was really a story of energy. By the way, in the late 1700s and in the 1800s, the real story is we moved away from using windmills and Middle Ages type of electric power towards using these incredible reliable and productive sources of energy called fossil fuels. And the irony of the movement today is what AOC and all these environmentalists are saying is, hey, let's go back to the kind of electric power production we were using in the Middle Ages. I mean, that's just talk about turning the clock back. By the way, can I say one other thing,
sure.
Dan? I love the left. They say, oh, this is an infant industry. We have to have the government subsidize. We're like, wait a minute, windmills are an infant industry. We've been using those for 400 years.
That's awesome.
Don't tell the Dutch. Here, I wanted to get your reaction to this shocking news. This study that was done by some professors in hotel management and marketing looked at 10 key markets where Airbnb has been deployed, the disruptive impact of Airbnb, big cities like Boston, Chicago, Denver, Houston, L.A., and Miami. And what they find, now this is going to stun you, Steve, is that the arrival of Airbnb has meant more choices at less cost than before Airbnb. Competition brought down prices and provided more choice to consumers. Have you ever heard such a thing?
Wow, what a shock. Maybe they're going to say that Uber is actually bringing down transportation costs, too. I mean, look, we are living in this incredibly exciting digital age where these new products and new inventions and new services are driving down costs. I mean, it's amazing, here in Washington, D.C., where I live, the cost of using a taxi cab has fallen. Why? Because if they keep raising the rates, nobody will use a taxi. They'll use Uber or Lyft. And so those kinds of, we call these disruptive technologies that change the old way of doing things. And what's so interesting about this, and this, by the way, circles back to our discussion about energy, the people who benefit the most from these new technologies tend to be the lowest income people, because instead of having to take a taxi that costs $15, they can use Uber that costs maybe $8, or instead of having to rent a room in a hotel that costs $150 a night, they can use Airbnb and it costs $99. And the same is true of energy. When you raise the cost of electric power production and gasoline, and that's, by the way, that's what the clean energy revolution will do. There's no question about it. It will raise the cost of energy use. That's a regressive tax on poor people. Poor people are the people. You think Tom Steyer, the billionaire who funds all this stuff, cares if the gasoline price goes up by $1 a gallon? No,
not anymore. Now that he's out of fossil fuels. Yeah, now that he's out of fossil fuels, or he made his billion, he doesn't care about it. But I tell you what,
exactly.
The
biggest hypocrite who walked the planet.
The Airbnb story is important, not just because it provides more evidence that Econ 101 principles are applicable in the real world, because we have to tell stories to the 4 in 10 Americans who think socialism is a good idea, particularly down the age demographics, like Airbnb, probably services that they actually access for exactly the reasons you just outlined, and say, well, this is what capitalism is. That Airbnb that you like so much, that's capitalism.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I don't think people really understand that all of these great new technologies are a result of capitalism. You don't see the socialist countries inventing these things. And incidentally, the thing that terrifies me is that because of all of these new products, like Airbnb and Uber and all the others, that you're now going to have I should say it's already happening. Regulate these things.
Yeah.
We can't let the free market work. We got to regulate Airbnb. We got to regulate Lyft and Uber, and they've got to pay the minimum wage and all of these things, and it'll just ruin a great new innovation that benefits the lowest income people.
Stephen Moore, I have 2 questions for you real quick. Washington Post says they have a draft of an IRS memo that says Trump's tax returns must be given to Congress. Is there a legitimate legislative purpose for them to go after his tax returns?
This is the most outrageous breach of a person's privacy. I think it's really it is a violation of the Constitution. Now, look, there has been a convention, but there has never been a law that presidential candidates release their tax returns. I worked on the campaign for the last year of that campaign. Democrats made a big deal out of the fact that Donald Trump had not released its tax returns. My point is, this was adjudicated during the election.
Right.
If people didn't want to elect a president who didn't release his tax returns, they had every right to do so. But you know what? He did not release his tax returns, and the American people still voted for him, and he was legally elected president of the United States. And for the Democrats to now change the rules. Now, look, they can. Amy, they can. I don't think they should, but they can pass a law that says, from now on, any person who's running for president has to release their tax returns. But you can't do it after the fact. You can't change the rules of the game in the middle of the game. That's what communist countries do. So, and by the way, I guarantee you this, knowing Donald Trump, there is no way in hell he is ever going to release those tax returns. What really worries me is that they're going to get leaked by some rogue agent at the IRS, which would be an outrageous invasion of his personal privacy.
Okay. And then also, are you still on CNN? Because I watch a lot, and I have not seen you this week.
Say that again?
Are you on CNN? Are you still a CNN contributor?
I guess you didn't hear. We've had a little bit of a spat. The story is that the day I was nominated, I was 2.5 years with CNN. They begged me to come over. They gave me a big contract to come over from Fox. They signed a renewal of my contract. They wanted me to do 2 years. I said, well, I'll do 1 more year with CNN. And they said, you're one of our top people. We want you here. Your ratings go up, blah, blah, blah. And of course, the moment that I was selected, this tells you about why they call it fake media and how hypocritical these people are. Literally the moment I was tapped to be on the Federal Reserve Board and be a Trump appointee, they turned their knives on me in a pretty vicious way. So I said the other day, maybe I shouldn't have said this, but they said, are you going back to CNN? And I said, look, if you go to a restaurant and you get salmonella, do you go back to that restaurant?
Okay. That sums it nicely. Well, I mean, frankly, though, I mean, they really don't need you at CNN. They already have a great stable of economists: Don Lemon, Chris Cuomo, Gloria Vanderbilt's kid. Yeah, there's a great economist. Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, Trump economic advisor. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys, have a great week. I'll be at Heartland Institute tomorrow. And
I'm going to be with you. I forgot about that. I'm going to be interviewing you.
Come on out, folks.
All right.
Learn about Trumponomics.
Steve Moore tomorrow night at Heartland Institute with me, peppering him with questions about all of his friends at CNN.
Will you Joe Biden him for me? Just Want to know how
Joe Biden from?
see how his hair smells, you know?
Oh,
Joe
get up
Biden
and
him.
personal.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I won't.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560.